Okay, right, members, we're now open the meeting. So good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public and press, and welcome to this meeting of council. Unfortunately, I have received apologies from the chair, who is ill, and our vice chair of the council has had to resign, not through any reason of his own, but for circumstances relating to council procedures and technology issues. So in line with the Council's constitution under Part 4 and Section 2.1, that means I need to elect a Vice Chair to preside over this evening's meeting. If I receive more than one nomination, we would have to go to a recorded vote. Got any nominations? Shane?
Thank you. I'd nominate Councillor Mike Young.
I'll second that.
And Councillor James.
It's all right, no problem. I'm happy to go with what the majority decide.
So if there's no dissent and no other nominations, and we won't have to go to a vote, then I'll nominate. I'm happy to accept my Councillor Mike Young as Vice Chair for this evening, and I'm happy to hand over to Councillor Young.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of the council. This meeting is being live streamed on the website and recorded. Before we start the formal meeting and hand over to the roll call, I'd like to have a minute's silence to be observed for the late Honorary Alderman John McRae. Thank you, members, for that. I'll now hand over to the Council's Managing Director to do the roll call.
So good evening, councillors, officers, members of the public and press, and welcome to this meeting of council. Sorry, I'm reading a different script. I do apologise. Thank you and good evening, everyone. I will now run through some of the working practices and etiquette for remote virtual meetings. Firstly, I would like to remind members of the virtual meeting protocol and the recent communication from the Chief Solicitor regarding council procedure rules, which has been circulated to all members previously. Members are reminded to remain on mute until requested through the chair or myself to speak, which will eliminate background noises and any unintentional disturbances. When called to speak, please remember to unmute yourselves, and members are reminded of council procedure rules in respect of speaking once during debate and the length of speeches. Again, these were in the Chief Solicitor's email, which came out earlier this week. We will begin the meeting by way of roll call of all those in attendance remotely, and may I request members confirm they have a paper copy of the agenda and can hear and see councillors in the meeting. I will now hand over to Democratic Services to begin the roll call.
Thank you. Could I start with Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher, please?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer?
Hello and yes to everything.
Thank you. I understand apologies have been received from Councillor Brown, so moving on to Councillor Buchan.
Yes to all.
Thank you. And Councillor Cartwright?
Yes to all, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cassidy?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming?
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Hall? I think Councillor Hall is in attendance, I understand, but is having a few technical problems at the moment. So moving on to Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. I've got everything I need.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you. I've got everything.
Thank you. Councillor Howson.
Yes, so I've got everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter. Councillor Hunter.
I've got the papers. I am struggling with audio and video. I may have to dial in remotely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James.
Yes, I have papers and I can see people in the meeting. Thank you.
Councillor King.
Yes to all.
Thank Councillor Lauderdale.
Yes, and I have my papers.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge.
Yes, I've got the papers, can see and hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Little.
Yes to all.
Thank you. As indicated earlier, I will chair that Councillor Loynes has submitted apologies. So moving on to Councillor Marshall.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Yes to all.
Councillor Prince.
Yes to everything, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Richardson.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Richardson.
Yes, I everything, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Stokel.
Yes to all, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tennant.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yes to all.
Thank you. Councillor Ward. I think Councillor Ward may still be experiencing some technical problems. So moving on to Councillor Young.
Yes to all.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll move on to item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any other apologies from members? No. Moving on to agenda item 2, any declarations of interest from members? No. We have no business required by statute. Item 4 is to therefore approve the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any points of accuracy that the members want to raise? Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher. Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. If I can come in now, I want to really just say something, and I suppose what I am coming towards is an apology to some. And if you can just bear with me, I'll be brief as possible. And this is really a personal explanation. Nobody has asked me to say this. I haven't been told to do it. I think it's the right thing to say. But before I do, I just wanted to say that the decision what was made in relation to the council tax support has probably been one of the very few things that has kept me awake on a night and has truly disturbed me. When I first joined this council, we had a situation where it was always the bedrock of the council to protect the most vulnerable. And seeing that unfold in front of me at the last council meeting made me quite angry and upset that we, in my opinion, we are losing our caring aspect as a local authority, and it concerns me where we are going. I don't want to talk about this tonight, and the reason I do want to say something is I've spent many years helping feed people, helping support people who have suffered with poverty and family poverty, and I think we made that wrong decision that night. And what I would like to say is there are people who do have selfie sticks almost when they're helping people, and I just think we need to be more thoughtful. And what I would like to say, as a result of this, there was a casualty in all this, and there was people demanding apologies who don't really deserve an apology. But one person who does is Hayley Martin, and she was in the crossfire of it. She was given advice on behalf of this council, and I think what I'd said to her was unreasonable and really uncalled for. And I am deeply sorry for the way that I did speak to Hayley. I've got a lot of time and respect for Hayley, and I have emailed her separately. But I think when you make a mistake and you're unfair to somebody, it's all well and good doing that privately, but I did that publicly. So I wanted to publicly apologise tonight. As I say, it's something what I've decided to do myself. I haven't been brought forward to do this, and I think she deserves that apology. And I would also say that I think the decision has been made and we do need to move on from it. Obviously, it can't be reversed, and I just hope when the elections do come, the people who have made this decision will be questioned on the doorstep about that. As I say, it's kept me awake, at night, this decision. I think there's going to be a lot of hungry people through this, and I just hope that the council and those who did make the decision can reflect on this privately and just think as individuals, is this really how our council should operate? So I just wanted to end there and say no more on the matter, but I am sorry, Hayley, and I just felt you needed a public apology for the way that I questioned you. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher. We'll move on to item 5. Are there any questions under item 5? No. Okay, there are no items under number 6 or 7. We'll move on to item 8, which is a report from Audit and Governance. I think, however, that we've having some technical difficulties, so we may need to come back to that report. Is that correct? You've got it, but you're not online just yet. Okay, we'll move on then. We'll come back to that report at item 8 if that's okay when we sort the technical issues. We'll move on to item 9, this report of the Constitution Committee, and Chief Solicitor Hayley Martin will present the report. Thanks, Hayley.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall in June 2020, members approved a senior management restructure. The effect of the restructure means that a number of service areas have been moved to different departments. And following on from the decision, I was tasked with amending the Constitution to reflect the changes to align the functions and service areas with their respective committees. During the review, it was evident that some services are cross-cutting, and it was considered more appropriate to submit a report to the Constitution Committee so that the committee could consider and make recommendations to full council. Members were also consulted via member seminar, and that report is attached at Appendix 1. The members' views were and feeling was that it was important to keep a committee for regeneration to ensure inward investment and economic growth, and that should sit outside of the financial decisions that are made at Finance and Policy Committee. This was supported by the Constitution Committee, who agreed to the proposals set out in your report at 3.2, with the additional recommendation that Council consider changing the name of the Regeneration Services Committee to the Economic Growth and Regeneration Services Committee. Members are therefore asked to approve the proposals as set out in the report, which would come into effect immediately. Thank you.
Do we have any debate on the report or questions? Councillor James.
I just want to second the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, then, if there's no dissent, we can accept that. Oh,
Chair.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just for clarification, maybe I need to go back to Specsavers, but I can't find the page I'm looking for now. It's a really minor point, but I believe the preference from Constitution Committee was that it be the Economic Growth and Regeneration Committee, and the word services be removed, just because otherwise it just seemed like it was a mouthful, and it's a minor detail, but just clarifying that.
Is there any dissent to that suggestion? None. Okay, we'll proceed as there's no dissent to the actual report. Okay, move that on. That's great. Thank you very much. We're still not ready for item 8, so we will move on to item 10. We're going to get an update from the mental health champion, Councillor Stephen Thomas.
Thank you. And the mental health report is very much focusing on the experience of COVID and the massive impact that COVID has had on the mental health and well-being of many people in Hartlepool. Whether it's come through bereavement, whether it's come through experience of COVID or the long-term effects of COVID, the economic consequences and impacts that are rolling out through COVID, or the fear and upheaval that COVID has brought with it. Many people in Hartlepool have been badly affected and mental health has suffered. The government estimates that the longer-term impacts of COVID and around mental health will take 5 years to unwind. I personally believe that that estimate is probably on the low side, and for some, the long-term implications and impacts of COVID will last forever. The report that has been presented is now quite historic. It paints the story of how COVID affected children, young people, working age adults and older people over the course of the first and second lockdowns. It pays tribute to local authority staff, community and voluntary service staff, staff from statutory health providers, and an army of volunteers, carers and people out there in the community who have supported family and loved ones during the course of the lockdown. What I want to concentrate on are some of the longer term implications for mental health which have come from COVID. And I think the first implication going forward is that we are in a long-term situation with regard to the implications for people's mental health stemming from COVID. As I've said, the government estimate 5 years for us to work our way through the and get back to some sort of normality with regard to mental health service provision. As I've said, I feel that will be longer, but it's vital that the council is planning and looking forward as to how we are going to address some of the outstanding and continuing mental health demands and situations that we will see going forward. One of the bright spots, I think, to come from the last 12 months has been the increased collaboration that we've seen between council, community and voluntary sector and statutory health providers. Quite often we've heard about a Dunkirk spirit being referred to, but I do believe that if we are to be able to meet the challenges that are to come, that spirit of collaboration and joint working needs to continue and needs to be built on. We've also heard a lot about right care, right term, right time and right place. And again, if we are to meet the challenges and to provide the support that people in our communities are going to need, it's more important than ever that mental health care is delivered in the right at the right time and in the right place. It's important that services are responsive to community needs, as far as possible based within our communities, and are providing care all the way through from early IAPT and other services for people with new conditions or low-level needs, all the way through to emergency crisis care. I'm told they aren't sick enough in order to access mental health service. In order to achieve some of these things, we're going to have to look at how we commission services and how the commissioning of services reflects some of those needs that I have alluded to. A further major challenge is going to be around isolation and loneliness. One of the things that has become very, very evident during the course of the pandemic is the extent to which people in Hartlepool experience isolation and loneliness. And I think one of the sad things that has come out of the hub experience is people actually reporting to the hub that they have felt less isolated and less lonely because of the support they received during the course of the pandemic and the early lockdowns. Isolation and loneliness, the government, Public Health England tell us, is equivalent to smoking 10 cigarettes a day. It has a massive and debilitating physical and mental impact on people within the town. And we must be looking at making our residents less isolated and less lonely. The final thing I would say is around the role of the champion and the role of the other champions that cover older people and children within Hartlepool. I think future champions have a very important role to play in making that link between our communities and the council as a whole and representing some of these issues that I have talked about. And I would like to thank Jill Alexander, our previous chief executive, and Denise for giving me the time to make this report to you and for recognising the importance of mental health at this point in time. But I do feel that going forward, time needs to be made, particularly given some of the pressures and challenges that we are going to be facing coming out of COVID within all of our communities, for champions to be able to make a yearly report back to council in the way that I have done tonight. And the final thing I would say is a thanks to Neil Harrison for the support he has given me in my time as mental health champion. So I'd like to move the report and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. An excellent report. I don't think there's anything that can be added to that, to be honest. I think it's very thorough. You've spent a lot of time on that, and it certainly, in my opinion, should be moved forward and presented to members for action and to go back to officers to move that through. Thank you very much for that. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Steve for the excellent report, and it does touch upon a large number of issues that individually and collectively the council has struggled with for a long time. But at least we are now acknowledging the level of mental health issues and the huge age spectrum that it covers. You know, children as young as 4 and 5 have expressed real problems that they're not coping very well. So we are talking about people that are almost babies in the true sense of the word, right through to people that are reaching 100 or well into their 90s. So it's a huge job that we're going to face. And I want to take the opportunity to actually repeat something that we've discussed previously. And that is that once we are outside of the COVID arrangements and we're back in circulation a little bit more normally, then the council has to take the lead and to instigate some form of memorial recognition services, collections of people to come together and talk about their experiences, because by talking, people will start to cope a little bit easier than they are at the moment. And we have to find those ways of encouraging people to come forward and join together collectively. A lot of families locally, a lot more than some people actually realise, have lost people through COVID. They've lost friends, they've lost members of their own family, they've lost extended network people. They never even got the chance to say goodbye. They never had the opportunity to go to a funeral. And we have to deal with those issues, and we need to deal with them across the town. So having one thing centrally is not going to be enough. We need to make sure that we go to each and every community and to give them the opportunity to speak and to be recognised and to actually say, you know, what they think about the person that they've lost, in the same way as people would have done if they'd been able to attend a funeral. So we have to look for those opportunities, and it's not going to be easy, but we have to do it. But thanks, Steve, for the report.
Thanks, Councillor James. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to echo thanks to Stephen for such a succinct but relevant report. It was easy to read, actually, Stephen, and you made so many points in it. And hopefully it will be taken on, and the good work that you've done here will progress. And it's typical of your way of doing things, but I think it's an excellent report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. I don't recall whether they were mentioned in name, but I would like to mention them in name and all the great work that Get Hartlepool Active have done. As we know, fitness is a great way out of mental ill health. A good friend of mine, James Rose, who lost his legs in Afghanistan, threw himself into fitness and was successfully climbed Kilimanjaro as a double amputee. So all the great work that, you know, Get Hartlepool Active are doing, you just like to congratulate them, because it does have a huge impact on people's mental health and well-being. And again, likewise, you know, following what Councillor James says, come the lockdown restrictions are lifted, I know that there's a lot of my friends which are wanting to get back into the gym to help with their mental health and get back in the gym. So again, just to say well done to the Hartlepool Hartlepool Active team. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cartwright. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put on record my own thanks for the actual report, and I think it's right and proper that in future years our champions bring forward similar reports to articulate the work that they do, because I think our champions are some of the unsung heroes really working behind the scenes, and it's good to get out into the public domain. And I would just also like to put on record, I think it was quite touching, the tribute in the report to mine and Councillor Thomas's friend and colleague Ruby Marshall, who was lost to COVID at the very start of the outbreak, and I just think it was commendable to devote the report to her, because she was such a huge ambassador herself for health and social care in Hartlepool.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher. I'm assuming that we just move this report for action to officers. Yes, no dissent. It's taken. I believe Councillor Jedhall is back with us in technical terms. We'll go back to item 8, therefore, which is the report of Audit and Governance Committee around Councillor Tony Richardson. Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Full Council on the 28th of January 2021 considered a review of political proportionality and the resultant amendment of a number of group appointments. During the course of discussions, interest was expressed in a number of the available positions by Councillor Tony Richardson. This resulted in a request by Council that the Audit and Governance Committee review the sanctions imposed against him in June 2020. The Council referral was considered by the Audit and Governance Committee on the 11th of February 2021. With due consideration of the short period remaining before PERDA and training completed by Councillor Tony Richardson, the committee agreed that the sanctions would remain in place for the remainder of Councillor Tony Richardson's term of office. On this basis, the Audit and Governance Committee recommends to Council that existing sanctions remain in place for the remainder of Councillor Tony Richardson's term of office as originally agreed. To make a couple of comments. It was a lively debate in Audit and Governance Committee, and I know that Councillor Tony Richardson has publicly apologised regarding untoward comments on social media and agreed to attend diversity training and IT issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. We'll go into a period of debate and questions. Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, if you catch your mind back all many months ago, it was actually I who proposed that the sanctions were applied at the time to Councillor Tony Richardson. And at the time, I believed that the sanctions were going to be until May, which was 3 months until the dependent elections. What I didn't foresee at the time that the elections were going to get pushed back 12 months. So what I will say is kind of echo what Councillor Hall just says, is Councillor Tony Richardson absolutely has applied to every single sanction. He apologised publicly and openly within the same week, and the Hartlepool Mail kindly published that for us. He's attended his equality and diversity training. He's attended his information technology upskilling sessions. He's attended pretty much every single meeting that has been made available in the capacity in which he could in the public galleries, trying to represent his people with one hand tied behind his back effectively. And he's done this really well. So for me, I've gone absolutely all in with Councillor Tony Richardson. I believe he's a good councillor. He's on the ground. The people of his estate and ward know him very well. He still lives in the house on his ward that he was born into. He's all for the people. And what I will say is now that I've formed the group with Councillor Tony Richardson, hopefully I've taken the political debate away from this, and we're just simply talking about the man, the councillor that is Tony Richardson. And, you know, Councillor Brenda Harrison and Councillor Brenda Loynes both recently went on record with the Hartlepool Mail stating that they would have lifted the sanctions if May wasn't around the corner. So let's just talk about the man. Let's talk about Councillor Tony Richardson. I can quote the Hartlepool Mill if you wish. Brenda Harrison is not very long ago that if it was another year, we might review it. And it's not, it's a few months, so I think it should stay in place. Councillor Brenda Lyons added, any similar scenario came up in the future, sanctions should have been specific date attached to avoid this issue. But note, in this case, they remain in place. So within the election scheduled in May. Let's take May out of the equation. Let's talk about Councillor Tony Richardson. Councillor Tony Richardson has attended pretty much more meetings than any other councillor on this call.
45 seconds, Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. So obviously tonight, I made it quite obvious that I'm going to support to lift the sanctions of Councillor Tony Richardson. I believe it's fair and reasonable. He's done everything that we've asked him to with regards to this breach of code of conduct. I understand the police are still investigating the alleged hate crime. However, we aren't above the law. If he has found, been guilty of that, then we will absolutely ask him to resign. Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Councillor Cartwright. Right on the nose there. Well done. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. I think I must have been misquoted because I've never said what Councillor Cartwright has just quoted from the Mail. Okay. My view is that, and it will remain so, is that although I appreciate Councillor Richardson has made every effort to do what we asked him to do, as far as training, etc., is concerned, the actual statement was that the sanctions would remain until the end of his term of office. Now, I appreciate it's been extended by a year, but that's been the same for other people as well in other guises. So it's just one of those things that, yes, was very unforeseeable, but is still there. So he's still in that term of office. And that's what I've said. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Brewer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small statement. If this was as simple as an obviously racist councillor trying to get back on committees, I'd vote against it in a heartbeat. I do not and will never associate myself with racists. However, I do find those posts deplorable and also vastly out of character for Tony. And after a year-long investigation on the matter, the police have still yet to find him at fault. Do we know better than a year-long investigation? I really don't think so. And he has shown, my apologies, regardless of anything else, as a show of good faith, Tony agreed to taking diversity training. He agreed to take technology training. And afterwards, and even beforehand, he's never shown any repeat instances of this uncharacteristic incident. I personally don't think that he made these disgusting racist statements. However, I realise that he has apologised for any conflict or any hardship that it may have caused any member of public. Again, something that I don't consider a racist would do. And I would just hope that this council consider this vote an opportunity for a colleague to prove themselves to not only this council but to the rest of the town, and to not mar them forever over this incident. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brewer. Just to be clear, the police investigation has got nothing to do with the report, so we are basically voting on the report as has been presented by Councillor Hall tonight. The police investigation has no bearing on the decision of council. If there's no more questions or and there's no more debate, we'll go to a recorded vote. Managing Director.
Chair, may I?
Councillor Little, I think I've moved on, to be honest.
I did put it up before you said the words. No, it's all right.
I'll go for it, Councillor Little. I shall give you
I've known Tony for a few years now, and he's like my mother. When she goes on Facebook, she shares things and she doesn't even have a clue what she's doing. And I've spoken to Councillor Richardson about this, and he didn't have a clue that he shared these statuses on Facebook. And he's gone to IT training. He probably knows more about IT than what I do, which is not very much. But I just hope that everybody will agree that what a good councillor he is, and he does work for the people, and it shouldn't be political. He should be allowed to go back into committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Little. Unfortunately, Councillor Cartwright, we can't have anything else from you, I'm afraid. We've
Just a point of clarification, Chair, if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll have a point of clarification.
Yeah, just to clarify to Councillor Brenda Harrison, I read direct from the Hartlepool Mill, so please take that quote as the Hartlepool Mill. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harrison was quite clear in saying that she didn't say those words, so I think there's an issue there between Councillor Harrison and the Hartlepool Mill that needs to be resolved, because that redaction will probably be needed. We shall go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do a vote for in favour of the audit and governance recommendation, and against obviously is for the sanctions to still. For is for the sanctions to stand, and against is for difference. So, Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Against.
Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher.
Against.
Councillor Brewer.
Against the sanctions.
Councillor Buchan.
Against the sanctions.
Councillor Cartwright.
Against the sanctions.
Councillor Cassidy.
Abstain.
Councillor Fleming.
Against the sanctions.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Hamilton.
Absolutely for the sanctions to remain in place.
Councillor Harrison. For. Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor Hunter.
Against.
Councillor James.
Chair, I just want to give a little bit of an explanation, because I'll be abstaining on this vote, and that is that I am a member of the Audit and Governance Committee but was unable to attend the meeting where it was discussed. So I feel that I should abstain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor King.
Against.
Councillor Lauderdale.
Against.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Little.
Against.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor Moore.
Abstain.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson. Tony.
Against.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Stokel.
Abstain.
Councillor Tennant.
Abstain.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Ward. Barbara. Are you struggling to get off mute? I'll come back to you. Councillor Young.
Abstain.
So I'll just go back to Barbara Ward.
It's not having it, is it?
Not
Did you type,
happening.
is she allowed to type in the chat? Has it
So
been
they've
turned
been
off?
turned off. Do you want to
Gonna
put
write
your
a sign.
do you want to put your thumbs up for against and thumbs down for for?
Wouldn't it be the other way around?
I don't know. I can't see Barbara. I'm sorry. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference to the decision.
No, it doesn't. So the vote is against the recommendations.
I'll just do a tally, Councillor Young, so that I can give members the numbers.
Yep. 1385.
(1368). So we've got 8 for, 13 against, and 6 abstain. So the sanctions are lifted.
Sanctions are lifted. There we go. Okay. Item 11A1 is a report from Finance and Policy Committee presented by Chair of the Committee, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report advises members that the final local government settlement has now been issued and that there are no changes from the provisional settlement. As we know, the settlement was very disappointing and fails to provide the grant increase we needed to protect local services. The report deals with the statutory budget and council tax calculations that the law requires full council to approve. This is an administrative responsibility, as the council previously approved the council tax freeze and the police and fire council tax levels have been independently set. I would therefore move to the recommendations as detailed in paragraph 6.1 of the report, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. Debate and questions? Nobody? Okay. Oh, Councillor Cartwright has lost connection and is coming back in on his phone by the looks of it. Can somebody let him in? Okay, we'll go for the recommendations then. Any dissent on the recommendations?
Chair, sorry if I could interject there. It needs to be a recorded vote.
That's fine. We'll go to recorded vote. Happy with that.
We also need a seconder, Chair, sorry. I think that's why Lee's.
I'll second.
Well, and then Councillor Smith, you can second it.
He's got his hand up.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, my internet dropped out at the last moment there, so I've no idea what I'm voting on.
Probably best that you don't vote then. Probably abstain from this one. It's basically the Finance and Policy Committee report that you've already read. If you think you've got enough information from the report that you've read, you probably can vote, to be fair. We're not in planning now.
Okay. Councillor Akers-Belcher, Christopher.
4.
Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher.
4.
Councillor Brewer. Councillor Brewer. I'll come back to you. Councillor Buchan.
Oh.
Councillor Cartwright.
Thank you, Chair. I'll vote for.
Councillor Cassidy.
4.
Councillor Fleming.
4.
Councillor Hall.
4.
Councillor Hamilton.
4.
Councillor Harrison.
4.
Councillor Howson.
4.
Councillor Hunter.
4.
Councillor James.
4.
Councillor King.
4.
Councillor Lauderdale.
4.
Councillor Lindridge.
4.
Councillor Little.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Moore.
4.
Councillor Prince.
4.
Councillor Tony Richardson. Councillor Tony Richardson.
4.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Stokel.
4.
Councillor Tennant.
4.
Councillor Thomas.
4.
Councillor Ward. Thumbs up. That's a 4. Councillor Young.
That's a 4, and Councillor Brewer's back as well.
Councillor Brewer.
4. My apologies. I was here for the start of the vote.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 11A2, another report from Finance and Policy Committee. Chair of that committee is Councillor Shane Moore.
Thank you again, Chair. The purpose of this report is just to enable the Council to consider the proposed Council plan for 21, 22, 23, 24, obviously coming from Finance and Policy. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, work was underway to prepare a new Council plan to cover this period, but and following consultation with the public, elected members, employees, partners, Finance and Policy agreed the vision and strategic priorities on the 9th of March 2020. We were due to consider it at Council on the 19th of March, however, we all know what happened at that point. we now have the new council plan coming forward, and I hope members will agree that the visions that are in there and what we're hoping to aspire, and this isn't a council plan that's being put together by one group or one political party or anything. I would like to think that everybody has had a good input into this, and we can all sign up to the aims and objectives that we have for this town, and where we want to see us going over the coming years. I'll probably leave it there then, Chair, and just to see if there are any questions or comments, and if not, we will adopt this as our new council plan.
Okay, we'll open to debate and questions. No indications. I imagine this is a recorded vote as well, so we'll go to recorded vote with the Managing Director. Can we have a seconder for that report, please?
I'll
Second
second
it.
it. Chair, it doesn't need to be a recorded vote either, unless there's any dissent.
I'm going to show these instructions afterwards, Ellie.
Sorry.
I've got a wonderful script, but it hasn't got all the detail. There we go. So, unless there's any dissent, we'll accept that report. Awesome. We have received a motion under item 12 from Councillor Steve and Thomas. Do you want to present that motion now, please, Councillor Thomas, or do you want to just accept it as read?
Chair, can I just say a few words about the motion?
Of course you can.
Thank you. Once again, I think one of the outcomes of COVID has been that it has cast a spotlight on the levels of pre-existing health inequalities and levels of disability and lifelong conditions that are present in the communities of Hartlepool. And just a few statistics, I think, to illustrate that. Over 5,700 Hartlepool residents in the age group of over 65 have limiting illnesses and conditions which impact on their day-to-day life. And if that is extrapolated to Hartlepool as a whole, you are talking of figures in the tens of thousands. And I think one of the important things to remember about access and inclusion is that it is a far wider, far more complex issue than we often think about. It's much bigger than things such as ramps and drop curbs, although they have a very important part to play. And access and inclusion issues, I think, cut across everything that we do as a local authority. And in the last council meeting, we had some debate about the equality impact content of reports that go to committee. And I've got to say that my experience of reports reflects the sort of theme of the debate that we were having. And all too often, there's absolutely no content in the equality assessment in reports. And that does surprise me. Everything that we do as an authority, whether it be regeneration, neighbourhoods, adults, children's, has an impact on people out there in our communities. And I think that that illustrates to me that whilst we have performed very well on lots of aspects around access and inclusion, we have an excellent Centre for Independent Living. We are doing work around accessibility of local facilities and venues. We have had a very effective Project 65, which has looked at digital inclusion. We've talked at recent meetings about the inclusion of disabled play equipment in future play facility developments. Despite that, I do think there is more that we can be doing to make Hartlepool a far more accessible and inclusive community and town. I think there's an excellent framework from the LGA, the Equality Framework for Local Government, which I think could be used if this does go to audit and governance. And the framework reflects very much the protected characteristics of the 2010 Equality Act, but I think also assists local authorities with assessing the effectiveness of their delivery of public sector equality duties and how well they are working towards that. It's very much based around understanding and working with our communities and the sort of leadership and organisation that we have within Hartlepool Borough Council in order to facilitate access, inclusion and equality through everything we do. So whilst I would say that we have done a lot of good things, I think the experience, the lived experience of people in the town with disabilities and lifelong conditions suggests to me that there are other things that we can be doing better. There are other things that we need to be addressing. And as an organisation, I think there is scope for greater integration of equality, access and inclusion into the wider work of the organisation. So I'd like to move the motion and hopefully members will support it. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for the motion?
Me, please.
Councillor Prince, loud and clear. Thank you very much. We'll enter a period of debate.
Sorry. Could I just speak as well? Is that okay, Chair?
Absolutely. You seconded the motion. I was opening the floor for debate. I was sitting back and waiting for you to speak.
All right, thanks, Chair. I mean, Stephen is really eloquent and he knows his stuff. Some members know that I've been involved in working with people with a range of disabilities since I was born, essentially, because they're in my family. And like Stephen says, we do have some phenomenal provisions in town. And I've got to say that, you know, Sue and Lisa, who've worked really hard to get the play equipment and the benches in the seafront, it's just a phenomenal start. And I think that it's great. And no matter how well we do, we can always strive to be better. And I think that all of us can agree on that we can always try to learn and educate ourselves in how we can make things better for everybody to enjoy our town, not just the majority. So yeah, I'm really happy to support this motion. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Prince. Councillor Little. Councillor Little.
Sorry, couldn't get on quick enough. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Prince, we fought well and hard to get those picnic tables and the swing when it comes. It's hopefully by March it's going to be up and ready. But we fought really, really hard to make Seaton a seaside resort for all, not just for able-bodied people as well. I was a part of the partnership board, which Councillor Jed Hall chaired at the Sale, where we used to have lots of different organisations. This is before I was a councillor, where lots of different organisations. I can hear background talking. Right, sorry, it's just I could hear something in my ear, it was putting me off. Where lots of different agencies came together to help our vulnerable people who've got learning difficulties and who needed aids and stuff. So this has been going on. COVID has affected a lot of things, and it's affected the partnership board. So we already have been doing things in the town. I think I should let Councillor Hall speak more about the partnership board because he was chair, but I was a part of that board, and I do think we have been doing things already. I just wanted to put that across. I'll let Councillor Jed Hall do the main.
Councillor Hall did indicate, and I think he's having some technical difficulties, so I'll go to Councillor Hall now. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. A recent motion from Labour Group to full council was excellent regarding universal credit. It was concise, topical and presented by Councillor Amy Prince, backed up with research. This motion is very different. The 3 paragraphs are okay, even praiseworthy. I've contacted several officers in the council regarding the Learning Disability Partnership Board chaired myself for 10 years, and 3 co-chairs. Unfortunately, the meetings has been suspended during these torrid times in the situation of this year. The next municipal year, this board will be launched in the new format. Valuable work has been done over the 10 years from the Disability Partnership Board: jobs, housing, annual health checks, and links to Inclusion North, an overarching body in the North East. My problem in the first paragraph of the motion is this. Over several years, the Audit and Governance Committee has, under several chairs, examined a broad remit of issues, bringing back several services to Hartlepool Hospital, notably maternity services, thorough investigation of mental health, antisocial behaviour and inquiries, searching questions on the finances of the council. It would be very foolish to nominate a topic well before the elections in May 2020. It would be reckless to tie the hands of the future chairs, vice chairs, members and hard-working officers in the Audit and Governance Committee at the moment. So I will put an amendment to this motion, Chair, to delete this four paragraph and amend: the contents of this motion will be recognised after the elections in May 2021, and 4 discussions will be examined after that. After that, I will support this motion.
Okay, amendment has been put forward. Do we go to a seconder?
Need a seconder, Chair.
I'll second that.
Councillor Little has seconded it. Do we need to go to a recorded vote? Okay, we'll go to a recorded vote on the amendment.
Is everyone happy with what's been proposed by Councillor Hall, Jed Hall, as what you're voting on? Okay. So the amended motion: Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher.
For.
Councillor James Brewer.
For.
Councillor Bob Buchan.
For.
Councillor Cartwright.
For.
Councillor Cassidy.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hamilton.
Against.
Councillor Harrison.
For.
Councillor Howson.
For.
Councillor Hunter.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor King. For. Councillor Lauderdale.
For.
Councillor Lindridge.
For.
Councillor Little.
For.
Councillor Marshall. For. Councillor Moore.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Tony Richardson.
For.
Councillor Carl Richardson.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Stokel.
For.
Councillor Tennant.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Ward. Can't see Berber. It's not on my screen.
After Labour.
Okay. Councillor Young.
For.
I think that vote is carried, Chair. There's only
much.
2 against.
That's carried. Do we need to do anything else with the rest of the motion, or is that just accepted as the amendment and we move on?
The motion becomes the substantive motion,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't propose that you'd vote again.
No problem. Fantastic.
Chair, can
Oh,
I just
sorry.
say, right, can
Councillor
I just
James,
say that
I
I've had my
apologise.
hand up for
Yeah,
quite
you
a
did,
while.
you did. Apologies, that's my mistake. Apologies.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment really before we move to the vote. Obviously, we've now got a substantive motion, so that's fine. And that is that it still remains, regardless of mental health and everything else, the major problem in Hartlepool from a disability point of view is obesity. And that then sees itself in many forms, both from a mental health issue and from people who have diabetes and other illnesses. And really, the way to deal with that in the main is through exercise. So I absolutely agree with what Councillor Cartwright said earlier about exercise. But we also have many communities in Hartlepool. Those that I represent are some of them. Councillor Harrison represents some, as does a number of councillors, where there is a major deprivation issue. And going along to the gym is just not something that can be afforded in those families. So they have to have the means of keeping fit. And we have asked on a number of occasions in various ways about the neighbourhood regeneration of our communities, which was agreed by council 2 years ago and should be in place now. And I believe very strongly that part of that has to be the inclusion of outdoor keep fit equipment that is free at the point of use and in those parts of our ward where it is most needed. So alongside children's play areas, etc., where mum, dad, grandparents, whoever might be in charge of that child can let the child play while they actually take exercise, and that they can have oversight whilst they are exercising. So we really do need to move forward on this agenda very quickly because we've already lost 2 years.
I believe Councillor James has a members' seminar on this subject on Monday. It's been put in the diary, so that will be worth attending for that. Those issues.
Whilst I appreciate that, Chair, a seminar does not make decisions, council does. So I would hope that council would agree that we need the agenda to move forward very quickly on neighbourhood regeneration and community support, and that part of that has to be health and fitness.
I'll pass over to the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, Councillor Shane Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor James knows I agree with her on many of the points she's just raised because we've had many good conversations on them. I was, until you just raised it there, Chair, just going to mention the members' seminar that's scheduled in for Monday. And whilst I appreciate, Councillor James, that the members' seminar isn't a decision-making body, the reason for the members' seminar is to refocus everybody's minds on where we want to be prioritising our neighbourhood investments. Because you're right, I think not just over the past 2 years, but I think a little bit longer as well. It's kind of, we've taken our eye off the ball, especially this year, let's be honest, because there's been an awful lot going on. So I think the purpose of the members' seminar is to refocus everybody's minds, give everybody a fair opportunity to chip in and to tell officers and everybody else what priorities they wish to see for their areas and the neighbourhoods, especially that they represent. And then that will then go to either neighbourhoods or finance and policy for a decision to be made.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor James, do you want to come back, or are you happy with that?
No, I'm happy with that, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor James. Okay, that motion is therefore carried with the amendment, and we'll move on to item 13, a report from Denise McGuckin, Managing Director of the Council.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, this is a bit of a lengthy report, and there's a late report that came out yesterday to members, so it'll be read across the two reports so that we can follow the number of the number.
Chair, before we move on to Denise, I do think I have a right to reply as the mover of the original motion.
Well, within good time would have been useful, Councillor Thomas. I didn't notice any indication while that.
I did have my hand up.
Well, I didn't see it. Okay, Councillor Thomas, right to reply.
It is very brief, and I do accept the amendment. I think that it would have been my preference to have it scheduled into the authorities' business for the upcoming year. But I do hope that members do appreciate how big an issue this is, not just for a small section of the communities of Hartlepool, but probably for about 20–25% of our residents in some form or another do have issues around access and inclusion, both with regard to services and into wider aspects of our day-to-day life in Hartlepool. So I do sincerely hope that the issue is picked up in the coming year and is followed up in the way in which I feel it needs to be, and in particular that there is focus given as to how we incorporate far more effectively in future the voice of lived experience of Hartlepool residents with disabilities and lifelong conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, Denise.
Thank you, Chair. Members will note there is one special urgency decision taken in the period November 2020 to January 21, which was to extend.
Your microphone's gone off.
I do apologise, Chair. The microphone went off there accidentally. I'll start again. Members will note there is one special urgency decision taken in the period from November 2020 to January 21, which was to extend the period in which the National Museum of the Royal Navy can exercise their existing break clause in their lease and to extend the payment of a subsidy for a further 12 months. This decision was undertaken at Finance and Policy on the 30th of November. With respect to the political proportionality review, at the January meeting of Council, members were advised we were required to undertake a proportionality review following notice of a new political group, which is the Hartlepool People Group. Yesterday, we received notification of an additional new political group, and that is the Hartlepool Veterans and People Party. And this has implications on proportionality and also the report presented to members tonight. I'm going to try and go through the changes to the report. So hopefully members have got the original report in front of them, which is in my business report. So on page 2 of my report, members should note there is no change to the first set of bullets relating to the changes to the Labour Group and the Hartlepool People Group, which was discussed, which was covered in the last meeting. However, there are changes to the second set of committee vacancies, which are now to be allocated to VAP, impacting on the coalition group's allocations. The coalition has to relinquish seats on finance and policy and planning. VAP can take the vacant licensing seat, which leaves the Constitution Committee. There is currently no vacant seat on the Constitution Committee, and therefore a member of the Socialist Labour Party or the coalition are asked to consider relinquishing one of their additional seats. If not, the committee will need to be reconstituted. The Hartlepool Veterans and People's Party can determine this evening if they wish to nominate a particular councillor, or they can notify the Chief Solicitor at a later date. Therefore, the changes are to the second set of bullets, and these are as follows. And these are not a group proportionality, these are open to everybody. I know it's very confusing, I do apologise. Regeneration Services, Councillor Lindridge is currently a member of this committee, and no other member has expressed an interest in challenging this seat. The appointments panel is Councillor Brown, and that is the same, nobody has challenged that seat. Civic Colours is Councillor Brown, and Children's Services, we've got nominations from Councillor Lindridge and Councillor King. So we would need a vote on that. But it could be that we receive nominations from the floor tonight. But I think the easiest thing to do is if I break that down per committee. This is really complicated, isn't it? So on the Constitution Committee, is there a member of the Socialist Labour Party or the coalition that are prepared to relinquish one of their additional seats? If not, we'll have to reconstitute the committee. Councillor Moore. Sorry, Chair.
It's quite all right, Denise.
Overstepping my mark.
Well, all I'm going to say is it is that complicated. It probably doesn't need two voices at this moment in time. Go on, Shane.
Sorry. Well, I don't know. I see both Councillor Marshall and Councillor James with their hand up. If neither of the representatives from the Socialist Labour Party were prepared to relinquish one, we'd be happy to, given that the Constitution Committee isn't scheduled to meet again this municipal year, so it makes no real difference.
Councillor Marshall.
Well, having sat on the Constitution Committee for a long time, I wouldn't feel happy. I know you say that it's not meeting. I still don't want to give up my seat.
No problem. Councillor James.
Well, I just want to go back to what was discussed at council last time, Chair, where I did ask specifically about those places where the Socialist Labour Party had more seats than under constitutional rights they would have had. And that is because we traded our seats on children's services and adult services. So my comment would actually be that if there is an intention to remove someone from Constitution Committee because there aren't any volunteers up to what Shane's just said, then I believe that you would be constituting all of the committees, because as of right, the Socialist Labour Party would want their seats on children's services and adult services back, because you can't change part of an agreement without changing all of it. And at this point in the municipal year, it's an absolute nonsense. To me, the easiest way of dealing with this would have been to have asked Councillor Tony Richardson if he wanted any of the vacancies, because that was also an issue at the last meeting.
Yeah.
And after allowing him to take some seats on some committees, then I believe that in the interests of fairness and agreement across the board, regardless of who might have jumped ship from one group to another, that those people that were on committees should have remained on committees for this municipal year, because in the main you turn about one or possibly two meetings of those committees before you'd be reconstituting anyway.
Yeah.
It's an absolute nonsense to do it at this point in the year.
Okay, there's another complication as well, the fact that Labour are in that mix as well. So it's Labour, SLP and the coalition who are looking to give up a seat. Councillor Prince.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to give up my seat on the Constitution Committee.
Okay. Okay. Do we know if anybody from the new party wants the seat? Is there a nomination from the Hartlepool Veterans and People's Party?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is. I can agree there at a later date with the Chief Solicitor, if that's okay.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. We'll move on then, Denise, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we now move on to the vacancy, which is not a group allocation. A seat is a vacancy and is therefore spare. We've got a nomination for Councillor Lindridge for regeneration. Is there any other nominations from the floor?
Doesn't look like it.
Davey.
No. Councillor Tony Richardson.
Yes. I want it as well. Yeah, I'll go for it.
Okay.
So we have to vote.
We have to vote. Okay, so we're going to go to the vote, and if you just to avoid complication, if you could say Tony Richardson or Lindridge as part of the vote. So Tony Richardson or Lindridge.
He's got his hand.
Oh, Chris, has he?
Oh, it's gone. It's
Councillor Akers-Belcher, did you have your hand up?
I did. It was just that
Mine's
based on
not showing it.
all right, based on the decision that was made earlier to change the constitution, the two reports that were due to go to the final regeneration committee of this year will now go to neighbourhood services because it's enacted immediately. Therefore, there is not another meeting of regeneration this municipal year. So it's a bit of a let's vote for people to attend a committee that's not going to meet.
And I'm
very good point.
That is a very valid point and well made. Councillor Cartwright.
Chair, I totally agree with Councillor Akers-Belcher, but people were protective over the seats, so therefore I do feel a vote was proportionate and was relevant. However, if they do want to have an immediate or an exponential meeting, then that's obviously always available. Thank you, Chair.
I don't quite know what you're asking for, but I think if we just go to the vote as we were planning to, and it will be Lindridge or Tony Richardson in the vote.
Thank you, Chair. So if members respond, Jim Lindridge or Richardson. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Tony Richardson.
Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher.
Richardson.
Councillor Brewer.
Tony Richardson.
Councillor Brown. Sorry, Councillor Buchan.
Tony Richardson.
Councillor Cartwright.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Cassidy.
Abstain.
Councillor Fleming,
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Hall,
Tony Richardson.
Councillor Hamilton,
Lindridge.
Councillor Harrison,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Howson,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Hunter,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor James,
Councillor Richardson,
Councillor King,
Abstain.
Councillor Lauderdale, Councillor Lauderdale. I'll come back to you. Councillor Lindridge,
Lindridge, sorry. Yeah.
Councillor Little,
You can.
Councillor Little.
Richard.
Is that Richardson? Councillor Marshall,
Lindridge.
Councillor Mower,
Abstain.
Councillor Prince,
Lindridge.
Councillor Tony Richardson, Councillor Tony Richardson,
Yeah, couldn't get me.
Councillor Carl Richardson,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Smith,
Lindridge.
Councillor Stokel,
Abstain.
Councillor Tennant,
Abstain.
Councillor Thomas,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Ward. Can't see Barbara. Are you there, Barbara? No. Councillor Young.
Abstain.
We'll just add up the votes, Chair.
John Lauderdale's back. Did you get my vote?
We didn't.
John, what's your vote? Thank you.
Tony Richardson.
Nine. Right. So, Councillor Richardson gets the seat. It was 10 votes for Jim and 11 for Councillor Tony Richardson and 6 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on.
The appointments panel, I've got Councillor Brown, but no other nominations so far. Unless there's any dissent, we'll go with Councillor Brown. Okay. Civic Honours is the same. I've got nominations from Councillor Brown, who's currently a member of this committee. No other nominations.
Nope.
And Children's Services will have to go to a vote. I've got Councillor Jim Lindridge and Councillor King, who have both expressed an interest, and there may also be nominations from the floor, Chair.
Any further nominations? Somebody's trying to put the hand up.
Yeah.
Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Councillor Tony Richardson. So it's three words. So it's Councillor King, Councillor Tony Richardson, Councillor Lindridge.
Okay. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Stephen Akers-Belcher.
Richardson.
Councillor Brewer.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Brown. Sorry, he's not here. Councillor Buchan.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Cartwright.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Cassidy.
Abstain.
Councillor Fleming.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Hall.
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Hamilton.
Lindridge.
Councillor Harrison.
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Houghton.
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Hunter.
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor James.
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor King.
Me, King.
Councillor Lauderdale,
Councillor Richardson.
Councillor Lindridge,
Lindridge.
Councillor Little,
Richardson.
Councillor Marshall.
Lindridge.
Can I ask members to put their microphones on mute?
Can I ask, did you hear what my vote was?
No, sorry, Anne, I was just trying to manage the
Yeah, I was a
background
bit
noise.
thingy as well. Lindridge.
Thank you. Councillor Moore,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Prince,
Sorry, Lindridge.
Councillor Tony Richardson,
Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, for myself, Richardson.
Councillor Carl Richardson,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Smith,
Lindridge.
Councillor Stokel,
Abstain.
Councillor Tennant,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Thomas,
Councillor Lindridge.
Councillor Ward.
Councillor.
Oh. Do you want to try again, Barbara?
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Lindridge.
Thank you. And Councillor Young.
Councillor Lindridge.
Just
That's what I've got.
So Councillor Lindridge has a seat on Children's Services with 15 votes, 1 for Councillor King, 10 for Councillor Richardson and 2 abstentions.
Well done, Jim.
So I'll move over to the COVID update, which is in the follow-up report that came yesterday. This report sets out, follows the Prime Minister's roadmap announcement. Key dates are set out in the report, Chair. 8th of March, when all pupils and students can return to school and further and higher education settings. 29th of March, people will be allowed to meet in groups up to a maximum of 6 or with one other household, although social distancing will still apply in all outdoor settings, including private gardens, and outdoor sports facilities will also reopen. No later than the 12th of April, non-essential retail, personal care premises such as hairdressers, salons and close contact services and indoor leisure services such as gyms and spas can also reopen. Overnight stays will be permitted and self-contained accommodation will also reopen. Outdoor hospitality can also reopen and there is no requirement for a substantial meal to be served alongside alcoholic drinks and there will be no curfew. Funerals can proceed with up to 30 attendees and weddings with up to 15. No earlier than the 17th of May, indoor hospitality will reopen along with outdoor theatres and cinemas, museums and children's play areas, hotels, hostels and B&Bs. Adults, indoor sport and exercise classes and large events may also reopen. And at this stage, weddings can proceed with up to 30 attendees. No earlier than the 21st of June, and fingers crossed and with a good wind and we all play our part, all legal limits regarding social contact will also be lifted. I can let members know that today's figures are based on the last 7 days. So we've had 155 cases of COVID in the town in the last 7 days, which equates to 165 per 100,000 population. And our positivity rate is going in the right direction and is now only at 7.6%, which is really good. As of the 19th of February, the Trust had 65 COVID patients and 11 in intensive care. So things are definitely getting better for the hospital. Still got pressure there, but definitely a lot better. Sadly, we've had 3 deaths up to the 10th of February for the last in the 7 days up to then. I am pleased to say that there have been no deaths in care settings in the last 2 weeks and no cases reported over the last week. And this is the first time we've been in this position since last July and August. This is really positive and hopefully reflects the impact of the vaccination programme. I wanted to pick up on a point that was raised by members earlier about commemorating and reflecting on the year that we've had and the impact it's had on mental health and also the loss and the grievances. And I think Councillor James and Councillor Cartwright and a few others have articulated on that. The 23rd of March will be the anniversary of a year of being in social distancing restrictions, which is just around the corner. And as previously mentioned, it's really important that we do have those conversations. We've got our Let the Story Be Told, and we'll be continuing to do the work there. We really need to pick up on the work that's been discussed tonight on mental health. And we're also looking at another lighting event across the town that will be held in 2 days. We'll be driving round and doing a lighting event in each ward, including our villages, to do something during the 23rd and the 24th of March, so that people can come out of their homes, not go too far, but actually see something. And that continues the lighting work that we've been doing all year round. When we did the 6 pillars for Bonfire Night, we did the reflection just before Christmas, and we lit up our memorials during the last year. So, and then we will be looking at a specific piece of art, a sculpture, to allow people the opportunity to reflect. And that's a piece of work that Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher and other councillors have been involved in. So we'll come back to members with information around that.
Can I just take a question? Is that all right, Councillor James?
By all means.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments, Denise. I think we will get there at the end of the day, and people just need that point of contact, really, and something to focus on. But the comment that I wanted to make, Chair, is something that I've commented on before. In the roadmap that's been put out by government, that's reiterated here in Denise's report, is that as far as I can see, there is still no intention whatsoever to offer COVID testing to students before they return to student campuses. And I think that that is a huge gap and a real danger that really needs to be dealt with very quickly. Because students going to university and returning to the halls of residence will come from all corners of the country.
Sorry, Councillor James. I do know that universities do have testing.
Of course they do. Of course they do. They test them when they get there. But what I'm saying is they should be tested in the localities where they live before they return. Because once they are actually back at university, if they have a positive test, they will just be in lockdown in their bedrooms and they will just be having education online. It would be safer for them to remain at home. So I want us to actually look at whether we can offer testing to those students that will be returning to the halls of residences of universities from Hartlepool before they actually return on the 8th of March.
I mean, to some extent, I agree. But the other point is, and we've got testing. We'll have 2 testing stations, and one is then therefore defunct. So if they've tested before they've gone to university, would you need the testing at universities at that point as well? I don't know what. I mean, the testing at universities could be an ongoing thing.
I couldn't care less whether they're tested twice or not. But I do think that there is a moral responsibility.
You don't need to shout at me, Councillor James.
Right, I think there's a moral responsibility, and to be fair, I'm shouting more at your leadership than yourself. And the fact is that there is a huge gap in this roadmap that will mean that some students who will be positive will return to university and take this illness with them. And then it will spread like wildfire again through that university. And they will be in lockdown in their bedrooms. It's absolutely appalling that there is no facility in place for students who can actually be of any age. I will just remind people that before they return and leave their home localities, they should be offered testing.
Point noted. We're going to move progress on this, I think, Denise, please.
Thank you, Chair. Community Governance Review. Members will recall councillors received 2 valid petitions regarding the removal of Wynyard from Elwick Parish Council and that a standalone Wynyard Parish Council for Hartlepool be established, and the removal of South Fens from Greetham Parish Council, but without an alternative parish being established. In accordance with the terms of reference, the consultations have now concluded. Reports have been considered by both Audit and Governance and Finance and Policy in respect of each proposal. details of which are attached to my business report in the appendices, and Council is required to instruct the Chief Solicitor to draft reorganisation orders to give effect to those proposals which in effect support the petitions. Is there any dissent to that recommendation, Chair?
Any dissent? None.
The pay policy for 2021 under Section 38 of the Localism Act 2011, full council has to approve a pay policy statement on an annual basis. The document has been updated and is attached for council's consideration. The changes are highlighted in the report and the policy is attached.
Any dissent to that? No.
And the Treasury Management Strategy. Local Government Act for 2003 requires the Council to determine a Treasury Management Strategy for borrowing and to prepare an annual investment strategy, which sets out the Council's policies for managing its investments and for giving priority to the security and liquidity of those investments. The recommended strategy was considered at Audit and Governance on the 9th of January and is attached to my report. Members are requested to note the report and approve the recommendations as set out on page 5 of my report. Is there any comments, Chair?
No. Noted.
Thank you. And finally, if you refer to the latest report that came out, it's to do with Civic Honours. And at the meeting of the Civic Honours Committee held on the 14th of December, the committee considered inviting the submission of nominations for Civic Honours, and the timeline included in my report is agreed by committee. At the same meeting, the ceremonial mayor highlighted the outstanding work of a number of residents in the borough during this last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that members of the public be encouraged to also submit nominations for a Mayor's Award. It was clarified that although the Mayor's Award would be separate to the Civic Honours, the timelines could run concurrently. Unfortunately, due to COVID and the lockdown, the most recent one, it has not been possible to advertise in recent resident newsletters. However, in order for the Civic Honours to be considered this municipal year, as was the intention of the Civic Honours Committee, Council is requested to agree the revised timeline as set out in the additional report, which members hopefully should have with them. This sets out nominations will be sought via social media week commencing the 22nd of February with a closing date of the 8th of March. Civic Honours Committee will meet the 11th or 12th of March to discuss nominations. Individuals will then be consulted upon as to whether they will accept their nominations, and accepted nominations will be considered at an extraordinary council meeting which is being proposed to be held on the 18th of March prior to PERDA. Any comments, Chair, or dissent?
Members? No. Accepted. Is that everything?
That is, thank you, Chair. It was a lengthy report. I apologise.
It was well delivered. Thank you very much. So we have 3 public questions that have been received. One from Mr. Ferguson, one from Mr. Swift, and one from Mr. Hayes. Another one has been submitted, but it was late. It came after the deadline, and therefore a written response will be put forward. Under Rule 9, the questions will be read out and responded to. Obviously, the rules of public questions do not allow any debate, so there will be no debate. There will be the question and there will be the answer, and then we'll move on. And we'll hand over now to the Managing Director.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll do the question from Mr. Ferguson first. Why, at a time when organisations and public bodies are being advised and encouraged to hold less private and personal details appertaining to members of the public, Hartlepool Borough Council going against this advice? I refer to Neighbourhood Services Committee on the 13th of March 2020, Appendix B, Section 4.5. To say this information will ensure officers have an understanding of associations and sites is ludicrous, and I would think against data protection. The Council have no right to demand A, B, C or D. This is personal information, has nothing to do with Hartlepool Borough Council.
Councillor John Tennant, is it? Yep, Councillor Tennant.
Thank you. The proposed requirement for additional information regarding individual association members would be requested should an association wish to take on management responsibility of site.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
It is considered that as a part of a due diligence process, the provision of such information would provide evidence of the association's sustainability as an organisation in taking on such an event. All information gathered would be held in line with any relevant national and or local policy on the retention of personal data at that time. The implementation of this has been postponed as well. The implementation has been postponed until 2022, and an allotment report will be taken to the next Adult and Community-Based Services Committee in March due to the constitutional changes that we have just voted through this evening. And that I put that answer to the question.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Question 2, Mr. Swift.
Chair, can I have a point of order, please? I've got a point of order, Chair.
There's no
I did
point
have
of
my
order.
hand up before it was taught. There is a
but
point
there
of
was-
order
But there's
because
no
I don't
point of
think we're
order on
following
the
the
question.
Constitution,
There's no
Chair.
point in the question. Is it a point of clarification you're seeking, Councillor Richardson?
I think it's a point of order, quite frankly,
Well,
because I do
there's
not
no
think
point in the actual question.
you don't know what my point of order is.
There's no point in the question.
No, I had my hand up before.
I'm afraid there's no debate, Councillor Richardson, but we're going to go to question number 2, Mr. Swift.
Thank you, Chair. So it's from Mr. John Smith. Under what legislation can the council give themselves the right to enter and inspect any shed, greenhouse or polytunnel that is the personal property of the tenant? Surely entry is restricted to the RSPCA, fire service and police in exceptional circumstances and not the council without the presence of the police and a warrantry of entry. I refer to Neighbourhood Services meeting, Appendix B, Section 4.12, dated the 13th of March 2020.
Councillor Tennant.
Whilst the primary reason for a visit to a site would be...
John Lauderdale.
Sorry, that really threw me
Is
there.
now exiting.
Just start
Okay.
again, please, Councillor
I'll start again, yes. Whilst the primary reason for a visit to a site would usually be to check levels of cultivation, should there be a reasonable reason to look inside a structure, i.e. animal welfare reports, concerns regarding the storage of dangerous or flammable liquid, or any other breaches of tenancy, the current rules of tenancy 1.8 power of entry and inspection allow any officer of the council at any time, when directed by the allotment service, to enter and inspect an allotment garden to ensure compliance with the rules and the regulations of tenancy. This would include any buildings on site. Should the tenant not be present on the plot, the officer would then give notice to the tenant to attend the plot for the inspection to be carried out. This ensures that the inspection will always be in the presence of the tenant.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Councillor Richardson, we're not having debates. I'm not sure what you're going to say.
Well, I would like to know, when was it decided that we couldn't have a debate? Which committee meeting was that? No, it hasn't been always. In actual fact, there's been numerous questions in the past
I'll
where
defer
there was
to
debate.
Solicitor.
I want to know when it was decided that there was going to be no debate. Which minute of the council was that passed at?
Yeah, I'll defer to the Chief Solicitor.
Yeah, it's included in the Constitution now under Rule 9, and it was took through the Constitution Committee, I think, last year when we reviewed the Constitution, and we included changes to include supplementary question for clarification and a referral of public questions to committees.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Question
Okay.
three.
Okay then.
Question 3, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Hayes. Can you please confirm the number of vacant allotments across the town and what measures you have in place to safeguard the sites against crime and antisocial behaviour? I should inform members there's a supplementary question as well.
Councillor Tennant.
Thank you. There are 23 vacant plots across all allotment sites. All sites have gates which are locked and keys are provided to individual tenants and partners in order to access plots. In addition, officers regularly visit sites and speak to both individuals and associations in order to understand any issues which may be occurring on site and provide support where possible, including feeding any intelligence through community safety team. Other measures taken include height restricting barriers on entrance points to prevent fly tipping, site checks made every week by officers to identify any issues, collaboration with the police in providing advice on target hardening sites with anti-vandal measures such as anti-vandal paint, fence strips, equipment DNA printing marking, as well as tenant engagement on site. Responding by emergency call-outs to works on site which would leave them vulnerable to crime should the item not be repaired. This includes the officer locking sites or plots that have had locks vandalised to prevent repeat occurrences. Intelligence sharing with the enforcement team for proactive monitoring of sites through overt and covert CCTV, proactive tenant engagement for any perceived crime risk or weak points on site with advice provided.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. There is a supplementary question from Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. Can you please outline the current year's income and expenditure in respect of the council's budget for sport and recreation?
Councillor,
thank you.
Who that going to? Is that Councillor Tennant or Councillor Moore?
I think Councillor and Councillor Moore have allowed Councillor Tennant to answer this, just to keep the floor going.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Tennant.
Thank you. The expenditure budget for sport and recreation was 2.375 million. The income budget was 1.835 million to the net budget, i.e. expenditure less income is £540,000. So to give you some background info, the COVID lockdowns and social distancing requirements have impacted on all leisure facilities operated by councils and the private sector. The government is providing funding for councils to offset the loss of income. The Finance Policy Committee have had regular reports on the financial impact of COVID on the council's financial position, including sport and recreation services. These reports advise members that government COVID grants will fund the additional cost the councils has incurred responding to COVID and the losses of income. A further update report will be considered by the Finance and Policy Committee on the 15th of March.
Thank you, Councillor Tennant. Those questions have been answered. We'll move on to item 15. Are there any questions on item 15A? Additional indication. There's no business in 15B, C and D. We're looking at the Cleveland Fire Authority and Cleveland Police and Crime Panel reports to be noted. That concludes the meeting. The next meeting is an extraordinary general meeting on the 18th of March. Thanks everybody for their attendance and stay well.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.